Hello, I'm Ardurik and I'll be giving you a tour of my most recent Factorio base. The basic idea behind this playthrough was using local power for each build. A couple of weeks ago I saw a thread on Reddit proposing this, and since I was already partial to the idea, I decided to start up a base for it. The map settings are mostly default. The only changes I made were increasing my starting area to 300%, disabling byte expansion, and enabling research queue. I did this so that I could focus on base building instead of having to constantly clear byte bases. I didn't decide to turn biters off completely because I did not want the playthrough to be completely conflict free. If I needed or wanted to explore and expand, I would encounter the natives and have to deal with them, so I couldn't completely neglect researching and building some military technology. As for the self-imposed rules of this playthrough, I had to rush solar panels and start using them as soon as possible, even before having accumulators. This meant that for a relatively short period of time, the base would only be running during the day. An additional rule I made for this base was that I would be using as little fuel for furnaces as possible, which means that after getting solar panels and accumulators, the next big tech to unlock would be the electric furnaces to replace my existing furnaces. This way all the power used by my base, including for smelting, was coming from the novice sun. So, without further ado, let's tour the base. Here, next to me, you can see the initial power plant that powered the initial research until solar panels were available. It's just 2 boilers and 4 steam engines and has not been in use for the most part of this playthrough. I kept it as a reminder of the old, unclean ways of the past. Here to the south, Here to the south, we have the initial zone where my starting resources were located. Let me just check. So this is iron and copper are all but depleted, but you can still see their remnants. The stone and coal starting patches were enough to provide the required resources for launching the rocket. Here you can also find the box of shame with the obsolete, where the obsolete technology ends up. This has the pistol, 9 burner miners, and my past armors, light, heavy, and modular. I'm now using a solar powered power armor, but we'll get to that later. Next up, we have the smelters. Initial copper and smelting area. I have an extended ones. They use a familiar layout for stone and steel furnaces, for stone and copper furnaces, which is how they started. But they are made of electric furnaces now, so they are a bit bulkier and had to be moved around so they could fit in this area. As you can see, each build is being powered by its own independent set of solar panels. And the old copper mine here is powered by these panels. The iron mine is these ones. Actually, this is a smelting area, the iron mine, and all that. The steel smelting used to be here, on top of the Jaren smelters, but because of the size, it had to be moved. And so let's take a look at the steel smelters. As you can see, this ended up being a rather big build, which required plenty of solar panels and accumulators for what it does. You'll also notice that the furnaces have efficiency 1 modules, like did the ones below. This greatly reduces their power consumption, thus allowing for a more compact power build. Down here you can see a small radar outpost. It's completely self-sufficient and runs for most of the day, providing vision and scanning. There are some more compact builds which withhold energy and just provide and just have 1 accumulator and 1 solar panel, but they don't run during the day. They don't run as if it was normal. This one does. So let's go to the automation science area. So this is the automation science area. It's a pretty standard 5 assembler build for automation, which is powered by this solar array here. All science, at least all initial science, automation, logistics, and chemical science are designed for run at 45 science per minute. Here we have a small area for building and buffering gears and electronic circuits, and these feed the mall, which we'll look at in a second. So, logistics science, same thing. We have a standard 6 assembler build with the inserters and transport belt also included, powered by this array here. Okay, so the mall, what I call the mall, is where I'm producing some of the stuff I use more frequently. This mall is very minimal, providing inserters, transport belt, miners, ammo, solar panels, and accumulators. As you can see, the accumulator includes a couple of chemical plants which are providing the batteries that are needed for them. Everything else, including refineries, chemical plants, and assemblers, are all handcrafted. I have to admit, I don't know if I like the idea, the result of having to handcraft all the assemblers, but aside from that, I didn't miss much else. Notice that all things here are self-powered. This build is self-powered. This build is self-powered. This build is self-powered. This was mostly because I didn't initially approach this as a mall, and I just added on each build, and each build got its own power grid. Moving on, here we can see the labs. There are 32 labs. Originally, it started off as a 16 labs, and that's what the power array is designed for, is sized for. So I could build faster, research faster. I added on extra labs and efficiency modules to make sure that I didn't need to expand the power. It's not the fastest research, but it's what we have. So down here a bit, we have the sulfuric acid build. There are 3 chemical plants here, which provide sulfuric acid for processing units, batteries, and I think that's mainly it. Actually here, and this is limited by a pump, which ensures that we're not pushing all our petroleum gas here. Next up, we have the initial basic oil processing refineries. Let's just go a bit down. We have the initial basic refineries, which provided petroleum gas for the initial red circuits and chemical science. As you can see, they were created before the oil changes in 1760, and I didn't much bother to change the pipes since then. After getting the advanced oil processing refineries, these 2 refineries were disconnected from oil and are no longer operational, haven't been operational for a bit. In order to keep petroleum gas flowing, this build had originally solid fuels, which were just putting the outputs into these chests. This eventually blocked up, but it ended up providing enough solid fuel for our base needs, including launching the rocket. This is another example how useful the efficiency module ones are. With 3 of them, these refineries take little over 2 solar panels and 2 accumulators to properly power. And almost the same goes for these chemical plants. Regarding the oil changes, after when they hit, this used to be the belt used to connect here, but I tacked on a little sulfur plant, rerouted the belt, and this was addressed. So it was super easy, barely an inconvenience switching to the new oil changes. Down here we have the 4 pump jacks that powered our basic oil processing build. With efficiency modules for each pump jack, you only really need one solar panel and 1 accumulator. So these are really easy to set up, which we can see in this in the other build. This one's when I upgraded to advanced oil processing, I had to expand oil because those 4 weren't enough, and I did it for this patch here. You can see I'm powering the pump jacks without even bothering to connect the grids. They are just powered by the solar panels right next to them. So next up, we have here the advanced oil processing refineries. I'm using 5 refineries, 1 heavy oil cracking, and 4 light oil cracking. And we have here 1 lubricant factory, which was added on a bit later when you needed it for science, which is controlled by a pump to not suck up all the oil, and we still have a good flow of petroleum gas. Next up is the initial plastic and explosives build, which is a bit here. So as you can see, these explosives are basically being used to make cliff explosives. And you can see, and this is the 2 chemical plants powering the initial plastic. As you'll notice, a big difference in the amount of solar panels that are needed to power this plastic build and this explosive builds. This is mainly due to inserters. Inserters, and especially fast inserters or stack inserters, take up a lot energy, and it's not possible to reduce that with efficiency modules or anything like that. So in this plastic build, there's like 4 fast inserters for each chemical plant, and that's why the number of solar panels is disproportionate to everything else. So next up, we have the big plastic build, which feeds the green circuits, which feeds blue circuits or processing units, and how do we call it? And low density structures. It doesn't feed this big-ish red circuit build. But okay, so this is the red circuit build. It was the first kind of big build, not the first in the order that we're presenting, but the first one that I had to build, which had a lot of solar panels for what it required. It includes this little area for reinforcing the green circuits, and produces its own copper wire, and then it all gets fed upstream. On this side we have the modules area. It produces level 1 modules just from this green and red circuit, belt. And it was also used to build the production 1 modules, which were later used for the production science build. Here we have electric furnaces, which again is usually kept at a low level, at low numbers, but eventually had a bigger array of slots available, so it could supply enough furnaces for purple science. This is the blue science build, which we're looking at. Instead of creating a big row of everything interconnected, I'm building engines on site. It is a relatively big build. I'm doing engines on site, but I decided to build this build and power this in quadrants to make it a little bit different and stuff. So next up, we're going to see the train station. Let me just pick up the car here. This is an outpost, a little outpost. There's not much here to see. Here's the train stations. In order to properly expand to later game builds, meaning the processing units, LDSs, low density structures, and basically that, I had to expand and to go, and it went far. So I decided to use trains instead of belting a long way. This is the build I used for the unloading stations, which we have just one. Actually, we have two for copper and one for iron plates. They are smelted on site, which we'll see in a minute. And train stations are a weird case where there is you can see these would require a higher number of solar panels than what we see here, but since they are idle most of the time, as you can see here, but this isn't the best plan, but since they're idle most of the time, I'm leaning heavily on having more accumulators, so we can power the stack inserters. I'm using stack inserters because copper needs a little bit more throughput on these builds than iron, and that's that. So we're going now to the expansion. As you can see, we have radars around. So on our outposts, as you can see, I'm using trains, and they are really close because I don't have to drag along power lines with them. Hitting all the trees. In order to avoid going around this big lake, one thing I did was build this bridge with landfill, and we got the landfill from this little stone patch here. We just built a landfill and fetched it and all that. So here is our iron outpost. I will not show you. I will not go directly to the copper one, but this is the iron outpost. There are no power, as you can saw, there are no power lines in the train line, so they were closer together. Again, note that the train station is a bit heavy on accumulators versus the solar panels. It's the same idea. The inserters aren't in use long and stack inserters, which carry more items, are even better for this sort of. This iron expansion has 2 smelting lines, which are blueprinted from the smelting areas that we saw before. Copper has 4 of these, as you can see here. So there are 4 smelting lines of copper here, and they are all powered individually. Here's the mine. They're all with efficiency modules, and here's the power. Okay, so the areas are relatively big compared to the starting area, but with the use of efficiency modules, the miners barely use up more energy than normal inserters, so they can be easily powered by a relatively small solar array. Up here we can see our only military infrastructure, which are these pillboxes. They serve to defend from a biter base that was here and was being reached by the pollution on the smelting area when it was going full throttle. But I ended up attacking it. They consist of a wooden box, a couple of gun turrets, and the wooden box has 200. I put there 200 pieces of armor piercing magazines. In my normal playthroughs, I usually power this by having some kind of fuel in here, coal or solid fuel, and using burner inserters. Here I just added the extra power structure with a power pole, a solar panel, and an accumulator to keep up with the theme of the playthrough. These killed a grand total of 10 biters between them. It was not much. We're not being attacked much on this playthrough. Next up, we're going back to the base and looking at the bigger builds, like processing units and all that. Let me just get on the car and move there. This was it was fun to do this playthrough. I really enjoyed it, especially building the solar panels, which we'll see we had some fun with in the later ones. So let's just go and see what's here. So this here is the build that produces processing units and speed module ones. This build was inspired, or rather much more like stolen from Nephrum's speed build, speedrunning build, and they provide the processing units and speed modules for utility science and rocket control units. I disconnected. You won't see many speed modules here because I disconnected this as soon as I disconnected the output inserters when they were done with enough speed modules for the science that we needed. Next up, we got low density structures. They just take the inputs from the trains and process them into low density structures, and this belt used to run to the utility science, which we'll see next, but it's now been redirected to the silo. Next up is our build for utility science. This has a local build for batteries, for the required batteries, and little green circuits here. But it also builds the electric engines and frames and all that. So it's a full-on build, which is just not being supplied with the low density structures and the processing units it's required to continue producing science. I would usually, for this case, I would usually have a robots build, which would supply the robot frames, which I would then use to limit the production instead of pulling out the processing units and low density structures. But since I did not use robots in large scale, I built these here directly. Okay, so here we have the production science. This build is way simpler. It just has a few rail production here, and I fed productivity modules and what's the other thing? Electric furnaces through here. They ran around the belt, and we produced the science that we needed. This was produced by the other build that we saw earlier. This is and now let's go to the rocket control units. This is another build I stole from Nephrum's speedruns. This is another build I stole from Nephrem speedruns. Basically, I'm sorry. This one just circles the processing units and speed modules here in these two belts, and it has a little circuitry here to prevent the machines from buffering too many. This is the build this is the power that supplied them. I'm using power substations now, which give me enough room to make more creative power builds. So down here, let me just start this up. Let me just start the rocket up. So down here we have the rocket fuel build again, with using substations, so we can have a little better, a prettier power grid, and basically the only thing I had to adapt from my usual playthroughs was ensure that we had enough, the oil. I did make a mistake here, and this is incorrectly placed, but it produced the rocket. Actually, we have still a lot of rocket fuel here that we can use. And finally, here we have the rocket silo, which is powered by this beautiful contraption, which we can see from above. And it's now building up the rocket parts, so you'll witness the launching of the rocket. The rocket silo says here it consumes 25 megawatts, but with all these modules and beacons that it has 4 productivity 3 modules and 4 beacons with speed speed 1 modules. And building a solar array for this amount of power would be huge. But as you can see, it's not using anywhere near that much power. It's using like 1.5 megawatts. So this power that's stated here, it's only used while in the preparing stage, which is a short stage. So I just added a lot of accumulators, which will be able to handle that load. Okay, while the rocket parts, I would also talk about bots, and while the rocket parts are being built, I would also talk about bots and power armors. I opted not to have any base robots because each roboport can consume 5 megawatts of energy. So the power for each one of them would have to be huge. Even if I'm leaning more towards accumulators, it would be really it would be very big and it would take up a lot of space. So I opted to using personal roboports. I spent most of the game with the modular armor, equipped with 2 personal roboports, 20 bots, and night vision. So that was basically it. All this powered by portable solar panels, of course, and a couple of rank 1 batteries. This is almost here. Let's just hear the. Okay, so at the later stages, I upgraded to power armor and everything in it to this configuration that we have here. So it's running now. It's pulling all the energy. All the 24 megawatts are being pulled now. Okay, so let's just finish this and then we'll launch. In later stages, I upgraded the armor to power armor and everything with this configuration. It has 33 solar panels, 2 Mark II roboports, which means I can have 50 bots, and 2 Mark III personal batteries, and of course night vision, so I don't see I can see during the night. Let's take a look from the map view at the base before we launch the rocket. As you can see, the first thing you'll notice is that there is very little pollution. And this is all due to all pollution creating machines have as many efficiency models as we can fit on them. By the way, let's just take also a look at the outposts from above. Okay, this is how the base looks like. I'll just zoom in to this side, to this part here. Since there is no expansion from biters, made it so the run was pretty peaceful and uneventful where biters were concerned. I almost only had to fight biters for expansion when I was clearing out space for building the base, and after that, usually pollution kept itself under control and did not reach most of the biter nests. As you can see here in the production tab, pollution of all time, it was mostly absorbed by the environment, either trees or tiles, and the starting area also had a lot of trees, which was convenient for that, and only a handful of pollution was actually absorbed by biters. So without further ado, let's launch the rocket and finish the game. Let me know, I'll just send one of these out, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, and I'll try to address them, and until next time.